Could I suggest that we save the flash photos for, like, the end? Hours from now. Hours from now. Well, I want to thank the Association for Library Services to Children and the ALA and the Arizona State Library and the Arizona Humanities Council. And special thanks to Penny Markey, who talked me into it. And greetings from the Multnomah County Library to the Maricopa County Library. And my very special thanks to Tim Wadham of the Children's Services of Maricopa City County Library for going mad trying to keep me sane. My talk is called Cheek by Jowl, Animals in Children's Literature. And the illustration for it is behind me and on your program. This is a painting on bark from the Mexican state of Guerrero. Now, this village, as you see, is busy. People are gardening and grinding corn and cooking and coming out of church and going to school. And there's a cowboy herding some cattle. There's a cockfight going on. A donkey pulling a cart into town. There are rabbits and chickens and dogs. I think they're dogs. They could be goats, but anyway. There's horses carrying loads, trotting down the street, past the drunk man lying on his back, kicking his heels in the air. There are fish in the stream, and up on the green hill, under the gold sun, stand two fine stags, one bright white and one bright red. There are almost as many animals in this painting as people, and all of them are mixed up together, you notice, cheek by jowl, except for the wild stags who stand aloof. If you took the animals out of this picture, it would not be a true picture of the village, any more than if you took the people out of it. Because the villagers' lives and the animals' lives are totally entwined. Food, drink, transportation, sport, the animals provide all that to the villagers, and therefore the villagers provide for the animals. Each is at the service of the other. They're interdependent. It's a community, cheek by jowl. And this is the way most of us have lived for the several thousand years of human history. The only wild animals in the picture stand outside the village, not part of it, yet very much part of the picture. Now, before history, before agriculture, we lived with those stags for hundreds of thousands of years as hunter-gatherers. A hunter-gatherer village typically consisted only of people with maybe some pets, dogs or baby animals. Such a human community was an element in a predominantly non-human community, larger community. Each species went about its business on a more or less equal footing. The tribal village, the anthill, the antelope herd, the wolf pack. As hunter-gatherers, our relationship to animals was not one of using, caretaking, or ownership. We were among, not above. We were a link in the food chain. We hunted deer, lions hunted us. With animals we didn't eat and that didn't eat us, our relationship was neutral or neighborly. Now, some neighbors are tiresome, some are useful or liked or laughable or admirable. That neighborliness, human and animal, fellowship, when positive, was often seen as a spiritual kinship. In that kinship, the animals are always the elders, the forerunners, the ancestors of the humans. They are the people of the dream time, and we belonged to them. We were the people of the deer or the children of the badger. In the immensely unhuman world of the Stone Age, little communities of our naked, soft-skinned species, beset both by realistic and imaginary fears, needed to know and assert its fellowship, its kinship, with the powerful, ancient, unchanging animal world all around it. We knew we were different, but we also knew we belonged. Well, the more we herded and bred animals for food and work, domesticating them, dominating them, the more we lived in towns and cities among other humans only, the easier it was to separate ourselves from other species, to assert difference and dominance, denying kinship and its obligations. But still, community was a fact of life. We could despise our domestic animals, we could bully them, we could brutalize them, but we couldn't get on without them, and we knew it, and so we knew them. But the cities kept growing and the farms kept shrinking. More and more people lived without any daily contact with other species. And in the 20th century, when the Ford replaced the horse, the last animal to be of essential use in cities, it became possible to live a whole life indifferent to and ignorant of other species. Our dependence on animals now is so well hidden that we can literally not know it. It takes an informed, active, uncomfortable imagination even to connect a living pig or hen with the plastic-wrapped slab or the batter-fried lump. The disconnection is radical. The alienation is complete. With the evidence of continuity gone, the sense of community is gone. We've made a world for ourselves alone in which nothing matters, nothing has meaningful existence but us. There are no others. Now, in this radically impoverished single-species world, pets become intensely important links to the non-human world. Watching the many animal shows on TV gives us the illusion of being in touch with that world. Bird watching, fishing, hunting, through all these we seek connection with non-human beings, or a reminder, however artificial, that there used to be a connection, that other people used to live here, that we had a family. Our storytellers offer such a connection. 3 literatures. Now, I've sketched 3 periods with staggering carelessness, and each has its literature of animals. And to go on generalizing shamelessly, first, the oral literatures of hunter-gatherer people are largely myths, in which animals are protagonists, and sometimes the only protagonists. Then, second, the oral and written literatures of the pre-industrial civilizations are, of course, about everything under the sun, but they all contain, all the ones I know of, a powerful, permanent element of animal story, largely in the form of folk tale and fairy tale and fable, told both to children and to adults, as myth is. And third, in industrial civilization, us, animal story is mostly perceived as being for children. Modern children hear or read stories from the early eras, both animal myths and animal fables and tales, retold and illustrated for them, because animal stories are considered suitable for children, and because children want them and seek them and demand them. Now, why are animal stories relegated to kitty lit? And why do most children respond both to real animals and to stories about them, fascinated by and identifying with creatures which our dominant religions and ethics consider mere objects for our use, raw material for food, subjects of scientific experiment, curiosities of the zoo or the TV program, pets to improve our psychological health? I think one might guess that we give animal stories to children and encourage them to be interested in animals because we see children as inferior, mentally primitive, not yet quite fully humanized. So pets and zoos and animal toys and animal stories are natural steps on the child's way up to adult, exclusive humanity. They're rungs on the ladder from babyhood to the full glory of intellectual maturity and mastery. Ontology recapitulating phylogeny in terms of the great chain of being. But what is it the kid is after? The baby wild with excitement at the sight of a kitten. The 6-year-old spelling out Peter Rabbit. The 12-year-old weeping as she reads Black Beauty. What is it the child perceives that her culture denies? Well, by raiding my own bookshelves and asking friends and getting wonderful help from the librarians at Multnomah County Library, I found the books to read for this talk. I hope I included all the real classics. If I knew books were read by kids, I included them whether or not they were published for kids. I had to leave out picture books or I would still be reading my way through the Ark. I sadly excluded fabulous or invented animals, such as dragons or winged cats. A related but different subject. I had an absolutely wonderful time reading for this talk, mostly rereading. All these books, some of them after 60 years. When I tried to organize them, it was less fun, and when I tried to wring a thesis or a theory or something out of them, it wasn't much fun at all. All I can offer you is a taxonomy. The organizing principle I settled on is a spectrum running from jowl to cheek, from purely animal to purely human, from books in which animals, independent of human beings, are the central characters, through books where the focus is on the relationship of animal and human, to books in which animals exist principally as symbols of human qualities or behaviors or desires. As for my thesis, I hope to find some answers to the question I just asked: why does the child turn so often, so reliably, for stories to the beings who don't speak? I did find some themes, some threads of guidance, but I can say now, I came out of the jungle of critter lit with a peacock's feather and a tiger's whisker and a white rabbit's top hat, but with no answers at all. Animals speaking big and little languages. A paradox. Nobody has ever heard an animal truly speak in human language. Yet in every literature in the world, animals do speak in human language. It's so universal a convention that we hardly notice it. This is from The Sword in the Stone, T.H. White. Do you know, asked the wart, why birds sing, or how? Is it a language? Of course it's a language, says Merlin's owl, Archimedes. It isn't a big language like human speech, but it's large. Gilbert White, said Merlin, remarks, or will remark, however you like to put it, that the language of birds is very ancient, and like other ancient modes of speech, little is said, but much is intended. Now, no other creature talks the way we do. No animal except Homo sap has the capacity that's activated in infancy and allows us to learn the full range of human language. Syntax is the key here, not single words, but combining and recombining. Coming with the leash in its mouth and wagging its tail, a dog is saying, it's time to go for a walk, sure. But I don't know how a dog could say, she and I might have gone for a walk if it hadn't started raining so hard. I don't think a dog can even think that. Not all thought, but a lot of thought depends on language. To recall what happened, to imagine what didn't happen, to tell a story or to tell a lie, to say the thing that is not, as Houyhnhnms put it. You need grammar, syntax, verb tenses, modes. You need what Archimedes the owl called a big language. But there's a whole lot of stuff you can say or signify without any of that wonderful equipment. Such discourse is different from ours, less than ours, a little language. But why do we refuse to call it language? Just to ensure that we know we're superior? As Polynesia the parrot remarks to Dr. Doolittle, sometimes people annoy me dreadfully. Such airs they put on, talking about the dumb animals. Dumb. God in the Bible says, let there be light. Only we humans are in God's image, so nobody but God and us can say, let there be light. But I ask you, what is a rooster at 4 in the morning saying? Children have to be persuaded, they have to be convinced that animals don't talk. They have to be informed that there is an impassable gulf between man and beast and taught not to look or listen across it. So long as they go on looking and listening, they know that we and creatures physiologically like us are mutually quite comprehensible. The reason it seems so natural for animals to talk in all folklore and many kinds of literature is that animals do talk and we do understand them. We do it by translation mostly. So do the animals. They don't translate our big language, or not much of it. What the dog probably hears is Rover, walk. But Rover was on his feet before he would walk, wasn't he? Because he translated our body language instantly and accurately as we are going walking now. And we translate the little languages of the animals, which are mostly spoken by body movements and positions and sounds that are meaningful but not specifically symbolic words. We translate into our big language, which has all that symbolism and syntax and subjunctives and things. So we understand that Rover is saying, just like T.S. Eliot, hurry up, please, it's time. And the rooster is saying to the darkness at 4 a.m., let there be light. And the cat, as he walks by waving his tail, remarks, I am the cat that walks by himself, and all places are alike to me. As this last example shows, some people are better at translating than others. And we must listen to them if we really want to know what the beasts are saying. The animal biography. The quality of a translation matters both literarily and ethically. A mistranslation can be a mere error, or it can be deliberate, in which case it's misrepresentation, a wrong done to the speaker. Few of the authors I'll be talking about deliberately mistranslate animal biography. The creatures don't talk or think in the big language. The author presents perceptions and feelings within its own frame of reference and avoids interpretation in human terms as much as possible. This method sounds cold, but it can only come from long, close observation of animals, which is likely to lead to identification with them. My 7 animal biographies are, in fact, all particularly warm and moving books. Of all the books on my list of animal stories, perhaps Bambi has been the most misrepresented, sentimentalized, and degraded. If I say Bambi and you are thinking cutesy thoughts about little skunks and flowers, you are suffering from Disneytis. Please go back and read Felix Salten's book. It's a book that tries to tell what it is to be a wild deer. It's truthful in its observations and its emotions. It is noble, austere, and subtle. Now, dog stories. Most dog stories, I began to realize, are love stories. Jack London and Albert Terhune are truthful to dog behavior, and they try honestly to interpret it in its own terms, but both Lad, a dog, and White Fang have a broad, romantic, sentimental streak. Lad's loyalty and virtue are rather overwhelming. And London gets carried away with the idea that to dogs men are gods. Loyal obedience to the alpha of your pack doesn't really equate to worship of a deity, although the human alpha male might like to think so. In The Incredible Journey, Sheila Burnford's 2 dogs and a cat have no such highfalutin ideas. And mostly we just see what they do. Burnford's realism and sober reticence give her story the credibility it admittedly needs. and a strong emotional wallop, too. And that is pretty much true of Lassie Come Home, the Sir Burnford's predecessor in that genre. The master of the realistic animal biography surely is Ernest Thompson Seton. Whether it's a bear or a cottontail rabbit or a crow, Seton brilliantly, carefully translates animal behavior to tell us a humanly comprehensible, compassionate, moving life story. He wanted his readers to know what the lives of the hunted really are. And this information has a strong moral purpose. If we know what life is like for somebody else, if we've imaginatively enjoyed and suffered with them, we'll be less dismissive, less fearful or scornful of them, more open to love. Our spiritual community will have been enlarged. I chose the biography of a grizzly for my list because when I was a kid, I could only read it when I was feeling brave. It made me so sad and so angry, like the old, sad, angry bear driven out of his kingdom. A grizzly leered. Wab, the grizzly, never speaks, although he marks a tree, which translates "my bath, keep away," signed Wab, in a language of mud, hair, and smell, Seton says. Seton does not force human intellect or feeling into the description of behavior. When he comes to translate the language of smells as Wab, the grizzly, understands it, it's a very fine, funny, poetical passage. It's not a long step from this to putting actual words into the creature's mouth. Mukherjee's Guin, which was a Newbery winner way back in the 30s. It moves from interpretation of behavior by the boy who owns and trains the pigeon to autobiography by the pigeon himself. And Guin is the only one who can tell us what it was like to fly messages over a battlefield in the First World War. The distress and the fear, and above all the incomprehension of his narrative, are touching and credible. How is a carrier pigeon going to understand a war? At the end of it, both he and the man he was with come home shell-shocked, traumatized, and sick from what they've seen. They find healing in a lamasery. The man learns to pray, "Lead me from the unreal to the real, from darkness into light." And the bird, in his own morning worship, flies to salute the rising sun. This book is admirable in its tender but unsentimental vision of man and bird as suffering creatures, equal souls. The founding classic of the animal autobiography is Anna Sewell's Black Beauty. It's a teaching, preaching story meant to make us walk in horseshoes and feel what horses undergo at our hands. It's also a fine novel with vivid characters, a strong sense of friendship and delight. They made a beautiful movie of this one, which is a thing one can only rarely say. The first edition said that it was translated from the equine. Beauty writes a clean, strong narrative prose. It goes far past anything a horse could think. But his knowledge and observations are realistically limited to what a horse could know or feel. An enormous part of speaking for animals is the translation of feeling, sensation, and emotion into words. The scene when Beauty sees his old friend Ginger dead is harrowing and completely unsentimental. I think the book has a strength and dignity that no other horse story quite matches. A recent and unusual example of animal autobiography is Caroline Alexander's Mrs. Chippy's Last Expedition, which is a journal of Shackleton's third voyage to the Antarctic, related by the carpenter's cat. It's a true story. It's illustrated by photographs. As the cat sees it, he is in full control of the expedition. Shackleton is nowhere. It's an extremely funny book, and the hero's serenity in desperate situations is very fine. But a child reading it might be in tears at the end. They always say Shackleton never lost a man, but they don't talk about the animals. Now, the animal novel. In the animal biographies, autobiographies, the animals relate their story to us, a pure literary convention. They may understand human speech or they may not understand human speech, but they don't talk to or with humans, only to other animals. And this holds for my next category of animal-centered books, which I call the animal novel. We're still over on the Jowl side of my spectrum. Animals are the heroes and protagonists. Human beings may run the world, but they're secondary characters. But the animals begin to act in some respect more like humans. Black Beauty and Wob do only what a horse or a bear would do. But animal novel heroes act from reasoned motives or for ends that, as far as we know, are human motives and aims. And some of them use tools, wear clothes, drive cars, have wars, acting out patterns of behavior that are strictly human. There's no explanation, no justification of this anthropomorphism in most of the books that do it. They simply assume it will be accepted, and it is. Could there be stronger evidence of the felt community of human and animal than such an unapologetic, successful assertion of it? Beatrice Potter was a superb naturalist. Her Peter Rabbit is absolutely a rabbit, but he also wears clothes and drinks tea. Just as Coyote in the legends may carry a bow or make fire. Kipling's Jungle Book story, The White Seal, begins like a biography with grand realistic descriptions of how a fur seal grows up and seal colonies and mating battles. In another direction when Kotick realizes, as no seal could in fact realize, that his people are objects of genocide, and that he is called to seek a haven for them where men can't find and kill them. His odyssey in finding that place makes a great wish fulfillment story that grows only more poignant over time. Two classic animal novels are Charlotte's Web and Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. In both of these, the animals think and speak like human beings and act out dramas that are a mixture of animal and human problems and solutions. Charlotte's Web begins with a human point of view, the child Fern, but shifts very soon to the animals. They talk and they act, and Fern listens. She understands animal language, though she never speaks it. And here we hit a theme that runs deep in many of these stories. The child is in touch with animals, but only while she is pre-sexual. Once Henry Fussy becomes important to Fern, she doesn't listen to the animals anymore. She can't hear them. As Mowgli comes into his manhood, he must leave the jungle. Only the virgin can touch the unicorn. One reason kids like E.B. White's book, I think, is that it is about justice and injustice. Is it fair for a farmer to kill a runt pig? Has a spider a right to kill flies? These questions are discussed openly and firmly. And it's a mutual aid story, beast helping beast. A fine variation on the folktale theme of the animal helper. Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim is totally animal-centered, but though humans are offstage, they're powerful and dangerous. They control things. The scientists of Nim have altered the rats' nature, increasing their longevity and intelligence. Yet the so-called wild mice wear clothes, like Beatrice Potter mice. They have furniture. They have both speech and reason. Mrs. Frisby, the mouse, hasn't been enhanced like the rats, but she seems quite as bright as they are. Her enhanced husband even taught her to read, though not as well as her children do. There is a real incoherence here. Now, some people are impatient with such quibbles with a fantasy. Well, none of it's real. What does it matter that it's inconsistent? It matters. The farther a story departs from accepted reality, the more it relies on its own inner consistency. By giving us a scientific explanation of why the rats act like humans, but no explanation of why the mice also act like humans, O'Brien risks our willing suspension of disbelief that most of us read the book without ever thinking about that inconsistency. It shows perhaps how willing we are to believe, to admit our fellow feeling with these troubled creatures. Mrs. Frisbee is also about justice. First, the unstated but fundamental question of the right of human beings to imprison and experiment on animals. And a poignant question, where does a group of civilized rats fit in? They live by stealing from the humans, but they see such dependence as wrong and degrading. They want to create an independent new civilization of their own. The unnaturalness of their situation and the risks they run and the fragility of their utopian vision are vividly described. And again, it's a tale of mutual aid among animals. The sense of the need to collaborate, even to the point of self-sacrifice, is strong. But humans are excluded from the collaboration. They are the enemy. They're what the animals have to help each other against. And though the book has a satisfyingly happy finale, I'm not sure that I'm very confident that the rats' utopia in their hidden valley can endure. There's an awful lot stacked against it. I think that unstated darkness makes the book all the deeper in the end. And I'm not sure how he pronounces his name. I will call him Brian Jacques. He wrote the Redwall series. In Redwall, the mice wear clothes, farm with tools, live in a great abbey building, write books, and so on. Evil rats organize an army, and the mice, though natively peaceful, go to war. Social hierarchy by species is rigid. Rats are low, bad creatures. Moles and other common folk tug their snouts respectfully when addressing the mice, who are gentle beasts. Now, a reader coming to this book as an adult, as I did, might ask why they're called mice when they don't do anything mice do, but act like a lot of bloody-minded feudal humans. But maybe calling them mice makes children find them less daunting than real bloody-minded feudal humans. Redwall is a fantasy. Brian Jacques makes no pretense of realism. I'm willing to say that my inability to believe his mice is my problem. I have a more serious issue with Richard Adams' Watership Down. This book, printed in England for children, but an adult bestseller, was praised for its truth to rabbit life, and Adams rather insistently cites his main source, R.M. Lockley's authoritative observational study, The Private Life of the Rabbit, a great book. He certainly used Lockley for much realistic detail. Lockley shows and repeats, rather unwillingly, but he keeps repeating, the doe is the center of the rabbit community, which is a matriarchy. It is always the doe who initiates a new colony. The females are the brains of rabbit society. Adams presents it as a militaristic patriarchy in which males do all the planning, thinking, and acting. Doe rabbits are mindless breeders. They are so beneath notice that when a heroic band of bucks sets out to establish a new home, they go on for 200 pages before it occurs to them that they might have a problem getting a new warren started because they didn't bring any does with them. Does this sound like any male rabbit you ever knew? When I first read the book, I tried to swallow the egregious sexism. I can't anymore because Adams claims scientific authority for it. He wanted to write a regressive fantasy of male superiority. All right, some people like that sort of thing. But it is not all right to cite a respected source of information while systematically misrepresenting the information. That is cheating. A recent novel, Firebringer, by David Clement Davies, has troubling similarities to Watership Down. He does kind of the same thing with the red deer of Scotland. There are marvelous authoritative studies of red deer behavior and gendering. And they just are not led around by the stags all the time. I'm sorry. They're actually led around by the old lady deer, you know. And there's a funny religious element in both these books, which is kind of strange. And I wrote of Firebringer, a book that brought out a spiritual element in deer existence while respecting the ceremonies and arrangements of deer gender and society, would be more convincing. Of course, we have a book that does just that, and I'm happy to name it again. It's called Bambi. Kenneth Graham's The Wind in the Willows is even more patently a fantasy than the animal novels I've been talking about. It may well be the founder of their lineage. The rat siege of Redwall is very like the war with the Wildwooders that climaxes Graham's story, even to the brave badger that helps the hero. Again, in The Wind in the Willows, virtue is a matter of species. Rats, weasels, stoats, and ferrets, and adders are all bad by nature, born villains. Seen as a kind of proto-racism, this moral genotyping makes one a little uneasy. The England of 1908 was a ruthlessly classed society, which the book reflects, along with a widespread human response to certain species. But, of course, fortunately, this is not all there is to be said about The Wind in the Willows. A beautiful and enduringly funny book. Mr. Toad sitting in the highway, crying, "Oh, bliss, oh, boop, boop." Mr. Toad has made us laugh for 90 years, and the vision of Pan has made some of us cry, too. The Wind in the Willows is a crossover book, escaping classification. Though the story is about the animals, human beings play a part in it. And here's where the fantasy becomes wonderfully audacious. The human beings are in the animals' world, not the other way around. When Toad is jailed as a car thief, the jailer's daughter helps him escape, disguised as her aunt, the washerwoman. And Shepard's illustration of this is marvelous. Is the aunt Toad size, or is the Toad aunt size? It doesn't matter. We are in a world where the human and the animal interact as equals. The world of the great god Pan, of myth and folktale, miraculously recaptured in this sunlit, nostalgic romance. Now, Jowl meets Cheek. Now, I'm coming to the kind of book that I think many of us think of as the typical animal story, the tale of the relationship between human and animal. A boy and a dog, a girl and a horse. In almost all the animal biographies and novels, the world the animals live in is controlled by or tremendously influenced by human beings. But still, in those books, the animal is the center of the story. With Will James' Smokey, we're at a crossover point. Smokey is a great biography of a horse. It's also a great portrait of a cowboy, and of the relationship of the cowboy and the horse, and of life on the range. Smokey and his cowboy Clint are at the same time stereotypes and vivid individuals, like all the characters in a good Western. And again, it's a love story. It's a story about love. In most of these stories, the relationship is positive, involving the growth of trust, dependence, and companionship. Often it's enabling, liberating, even a redemption to the animal or the human or both. But it may be a negative connection, involving the wild animal's well-deserved fear of the human, as in Bambi and many of Thompson Seton's stories, or the human abuse of tamed animals, as in episodes in Black Beauty and White Fang and Smokey. Straightforward classics of the positive, loving, enabling relationship between child and animal are The Black Stallion and Misty of Chincoteague and all the galloping herd of their descendants by Farley and Henry and many other authors. Then there's National Velvet, really a delicate satirical comedy about human relationships and ambitions, but deeply sympathetic to the child's passion for the horse, and allowing her the marvelous fairy tale victory, better even than Seabiscuit. And there's Jungle Ben, where boy saves bear and bear saves boy. Again, we're meeting the theme of mutual aid, the animal helper. There's Old Yeller, where dog rescues boy, but boy in the end can't rescue dog. And in Julie of the Wolves, The wolves save the child thanks to her wits and courage and her knowledge of wolf etiquette. But she can't save the wolves. That book has a very bitter ending. 3 of the great works of children's literature and animal literature are Dr. Dolittle, The Jungle Books, and The Sword in the Stone. Each involves the relationship of human and animal. In each it's different, and each explores it in depth. Now that could sound a bit fancy talking about Dr. Dolittle, but Hugh Lofting's unpretentious fantasy deserves its classic status. As in The Wind and the Willows, humans and animals interact without the slightest plausibility and without the slightest hesitation. This is because the animals mostly act like people, but they act better than most people. None of them does anything cruel or immoral. Gub-Gub is very piggy, and the lion has to be scolded by his wife before he'll help the other animals. But this is the peaceable kingdom, where the lion will truly lie down with the lamb or the pig, as the case may be. Dr. Dolittle helps animals by sheltering them and healing them, and they begin to help him in return. And that's the theme and the basis of almost everything in the story. So long as the birds and the beasts and the fishes are my friends, I do not have to be afraid, he says. This theme of the animal helper is ancient in folktale and before that in myth. Every people in the world, I think, understood it until we drove the animals out of our streets and skyscrapers. I think every child in the world still understands. To be friends with the animals is to be a friend and a child of the world, connected to it, nourished by it, belonging to it. Hugh Lofting's morality is entirely sweet and sunny. In Kipling's Mowgli stories, the connections between human and animal are complex and ultimately tragic. Mowgli is a link between his village people and the people of the jungle. And as a go-between, a liminal figure is liable to be, he is torn between the two sides, torn apart. There is no common ground between the village and the jungle. They have turned their backs on each other. In every language of the animals, Mowgli has learned to say, "We be of one blood, ye and I." But can he truly say it in Hindi? And yet that is his mother's tongue, his mother's blood. Whom must he betray? The wolf child, the wild boy, both in rare and painful reality and in Kipling's dream story, can never, in the end, be completely at home. The ache of exile from Eden is there even in the first story, Mowgli's brothers. It gets ever stronger in Letting in the Jungle and The Spring Running. Those are heartbreaking stories. And yet from the Jungle Books, we may also carry with us all our lives the blessing of those lazy hours and breathless adventures when boy and wolf, bear, black panther, python speak and think and act in joyous community. The mystery and beauty of belonging, totally belonging to the wildness of the world. T.H. White's The Sword in the Stone is as full of animals as my Guerrero painting. Nearly. In the first chapter, King Arthur to be, currently known as the Wart, takes out a goshawk and loses him and meets Merlin's owl, Archimedes. "Oh, what a lovely owl," cried the Wart. But when he went up to it and held out his hand, the owl grew half as tall again, stood up as stiff as a poker, closed its eyes so that there was only the smallest slit to peep through, and said in a doubtful voice, "There is no owl." Then it shut its eyes entirely and looked the other way. "It's only a boy," Merlin said. "There is no boy," the owl said hopefully, without turning around. Our cat does that to us now and then. Merlin undertakes Arthur's education, which consists mostly of being turned into animals. And here we are meeting the great mythic, shamanic theme of transformation. The boy becomes a fish, a hawk, a snake, an owl, a badger. He participates at 30 years per minute in the sentience of trees, and then at 2 million years per second in the sentience of stone. All these scenes of participation in animal being are funny, vivid, startling, and wise. At the climax of the book, Wart cannot draw the sword of kinship from the stone anvil by himself. So he calls to Merlin for help, and the animals come. There were otters and nightingales and vulgar crows and hares and serpents and falcons and fishes and goats and dogs and dainty unicorns and newts and solitary wasps and goat-moth caterpillars and corking drills and volcanoes and mighty trees and patient stones. All, down to the smallest shrew mouse, had come to help on account of love. Wart felt his power grow. And each creature calls its special wisdom to the boy who has been one of them, been one with them. The pikefish says, put your back into it. And the stone says, cohere. And the snake says, fold your powers together with the spirit of your mind. And the wart walked up to the great sword for the third time. He put out his right hand softly and drew it out as gently as from a scabbard. T.H. White was a man to whom animals were very important, perhaps in part because his human relationships were so tormented. But his sense of connection with non-human lives goes far beyond mere compensation. It's a passionate vision of a moral universe, a world of terrible pain and cruelty, from which trust and love spring like an autumn crocus, vulnerable and unconquerable. The Sword in the Stone, which I first read at 13 or so, influenced my mind and heart in ways which must be quite clear in the course of this talk, convincing me that trust cannot be limited to mankind, that love cannot be specified. It's all or nothing at all. If called to reign, you distrust and scorn your subjects, your own kingdom will be that of greed and hate. Love and trust and be a king, and your kingdom will be the whole world. And to your coronation, among all the wondrous gifts, an anonymous hedgehog will send 4 or 5 dirty leaves with some fleas in them. Fables and psychic fragments. In general, everybody can talk to everybody else. You can get into an argument with a bean or a sausage. Superiority is not a matter of species. It is individual and unpredictable. And the two themes of transformation and the animal helper come up again and again. Now, ever since the Stone Age, people have been calling other people greedy as a hog or brave as a lion. What is remarkable about a voyage to the, I shall now attempt to pronounce their name properly, a voyage to the is not so much that Jonathan Swift used horses to provide a model of Enlightenment morality, but that he used humans to satirize human vice. The honesty and dignity of the is not much exaggerated from that of ordinary horses, who are honest and dignified animals. But they speak, and so they're raised above the brute, while the yahoos have no language and no virtues, and are sunk thus below any brute. Gulliver says, I never beheld in all my travels so disagreeable an animal. Swift is careful never to compare the yahoos to apes. If the yahoos were mere apes, they would have a sort of excuse for their nastiness. He wanted us to see them as men, and we do. George Orwell's Animal Farm is a less complex satire, more straightforward in its stereotypes, therefore perhaps less disturbing to a young reader. But Orwell is in the end, I think, even harsher than Swift, for loyalty and honesty lose out in the modern fable. Whether the story is read as politically topical or as a general warning, its message is pretty merciless. The last animal satire I will mention is one you may not think of as satirical. It's so sweet-natured. Perhaps all the stronger for that. I mean Ferdinand the Bull, which, when you come right down to it, is almost as hard on humans as Swift is, but a good deal more hopeful than Orwell. And is there any other satire in the world that ends with no irony at all? He is very happy. The last two books in this section are two widely different fantasies. Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy is a long, richly imagined, and I think deeply incoherent work, in which I'll try only to trace the part animals play. Despite appearances, it's a small part. The two cats in the story, who have a small but important role, do what cats have often done in myth and fable. They cross between worlds. Animals are otherwise absent except for a tribe of polar bears who talk and build forts and use weapons. And do you pronounce it daemons? D-A-E-M-O-N. I'll call them daemons, because it certainly doesn't mean demons. Daemons are animal in form, and the reason why the trilogy seems to be full of animals is that every human being has a daemon. Until you reach puberty, your daemon may take any animal shape at any moment. With your sexual maturity, it settles into a permanent form, always of the other gender. Your daemon accompanies you physically and closely at all times, everywhere. Separation is unbearably painful. Though they do not eat or excrete, daemons are tangible, and you can pet and cuddle with your own daemon, though you must not touch anybody else's. Daemons are rational creatures and speak fluently with their owners and with others. I think wish fulfillment is strong in this concept and gives it great charm. The ever-loyal, ever-present, beloved companion, soulmate, comforter, guardian angel, and ultimately perfect pet you don't even have to remember to feed it. But Pullman overloads the concept, and it gets confused, I think. He implies strongly that your daemon is a sort of visible soul, that to be severed from it is fatal. His plot hinges on the horror of this severance. And then he begins changing the rules. We find that witches can live separate from their daemons, and in the second volume we enter our world where nobody has visible, tangible daemons. Then back in her world, Lyra leaves her daemon on the wharves of hell, and though she misses him, she lives on perfectly competently, and in fact saves the universe without him. And their reunion seems almost perfunctory. Now, in fantasy, to change or break your own rules is to make the story literally inconsequential. If the daemons are intended to show that we're part animal and must not be severed from our animality, they can't do it, because the essence of animality is the body, the living body with its brainless needs and embarrassing functions, exactly what the daemons don't have. They're spiritual beings. They're forms without substance. They seem to be fragments or images of the human psyche, wholly contingent, having no independent being, therefore incapable of relationship. Lyra's love for her daemon is much emphasized, but it's self-love. In Pullman's world, human beings are dreadfully alone since God has gone senile, and there aren't any real animals except those two cats. Let us place our hope in the cats. Through the Looking Glass begins with cats. Alice is talking to Dinah and the kittens who don't talk back. So Alice does it for them, and then she climbs up onto the mantelpiece with one of the kittens and goes through the mirror. As I noted before, cats cross between worlds. The Looking Glass world and the one down the rabbit hole are dreams, and therefore all the characters in them are aspects of Alice, fragments of psyche, but in a very different sense from Pullman's daemons. Their independence is notable. As soon as Alice gets through the glass into the garden, the flowers not only talk, they talk back. They are extremely rude and passionate flowers. As in folktale, all creatures there are on an equal footing, mingling and arguing and even turning into one another. The baby becomes a piglet. The white queen becomes a sheep. Transformation going both ways. Train passengers include human, a goat, a beetle, a horse, and a gnat, which begins as a tiny voice in Alice's ear, but presently is about the size of a chicken. And this gnat, the size of a chicken, asks, if Alice dislikes all insects, and she replies with admirable aplomb, "I like them when they can talk, and none of them ever talk where I come from." Alice is a 19th century British middle-class child with a tight, strict moral code of self-respect and respect for others. Her good manners are sorely tried by the behavior of the dream creatures, whom we can see, if we choose, as acting out Alice's own impulses of rebellion, her passion, her wild willfulness. Violence is not permitted. We know that the Queen's "off with her head" is a threat not to be executed. And yet, nightmare is never far off. The creatures of Alice's dreams come close to total uncontrol, to madness. She must wake to know herself. The Alice books are not animal stories, but there is no way I could leave them out of this talk. They are the purest modern literary instance of the animals of the mind, the dream beasts that every human society has known as ancestors, as spirit doubles, as omens, as monsters, and as guides. We have spiraled back round to the dream time where human and animal are one. This is a sacred place. That we got back to it by following a little Victorian girl down a rabbit hole is absolutely crazy and appropriate. In conclusion, we human beings have made a world reduced to ourselves and our artifacts, and have to teach our children to live in it. Physically and mentally equipped to be at home in a richly various, unpredictable environment, competing and coexisting with creatures of all kinds, our children have to learn poverty and exile, how to live with one species only, seeing a beast now and then through bars. But our innate acute interest in animals as fellow beings, friend or enemy or food or playmate, cannot be instantly eradicated. It resists deprivation. And imagination and literature are there to fill the void and reaffirm the greater community. The themes I met in my reading support this notion. The animal helper motif of mutual aid across species, which we see in folktale and in modern animal stories, tells that kindness and gratitude cannot be limited to your own species, that all creatures are kin. Community is simply taken for granted by the assimilation of animal to human and the mingling as equals that we see in folktale and such books as The Wind in the Willows and Dr. Dolittle. Transformation of man into beast, which in folktales is often a curse or an unhappy spell, in modern stories is more likely to be enlarging and educational, or even, as in the Wart's last great journey, to offer a glimpse of mystical participation of an ultimate eternal communion. The yearning for a lost wilderness, which runs through so many animal tales, is a lament for the endless landscapes and creatures and species that we have wasted and destroyed. These laments grow urgent now. We come ever closer to isolating ourselves a solitary species swarming on a desert world. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. We go crazy in solitude. We are social primates. Human beings need to belong to one another first, of course. But because we can see so far and think so cleverly and imagine so much, we are not satisfied by membership in a family, a tribe, people just like us. Fearful and suspicious as it is, the human mind yearns towards a greater belonging, a vaster identification. Wilderness scares us because it's unknown, indifferent, and dangerous, yet it is an absolute need to us. That animal otherness, that strangeness, older and greater than ourselves, that we must join or rejoin if we want to stay sane and stay alive. The child is our closest link to it. The storytellers know that. Mowgli and young Wart reach out their hands, the right hand to us, and the left hand to the jungle, to the wild beast in the wilderness, to the hawk and the owl and the panther and the wolf. They join us together. The 6-year-old spelling out Peter Rabbit, the 12-year-old weeping over Black Beauty. They have accepted what so much of their culture denies, and they too reach out their hands to rejoin us to the greater creation. keeping us where we belong. Thank you.